Let me make sure we're streaming on the places we should be. Live here. Live here. Let me hit this button. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Fast and Furious, Hobbes Shaw. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we talk about games, but we're finishing up our deep dive into the Fast and Furious franchise, a franchise I have very normal feelings about, okay, very real, straightforward feelings, not weird feelings about, okay. Yeah, I guess we're getting into it. I guess we're going hard. Hobbs and Shaw. We did it. It's out. Where do we start? What do you want to say?
I guess pre-spoiler feelings. I guess maybe we're close enough to the present day that we want to do pre-spoiler warnings. Or pre-spoiler opinions. I thought this movie was fine. I thought it was entertaining. Especially it grew on me more as the movie went on. The opening of the movie, I was like, oh, this is Fast and Furious does a Marvel movie, and not in the good ways. And I'm not in for a good time. But the very kind of bad jokes petered out relatively early on, and so I didn't feel as bad about it. It's also probably the least Fast and Furious movie of all of these movies that we've watched so far. This feels more like a straight action flick than it does a nominal, race car superhero flick, which is kind of how we've been describing the later Fast and Furious movies. So those are kind of I thought it was neat. I have yet to see, obviously, how much it plays into any of the later movies and if it needs, if it's worth it. But I did not regret watching this movie in any way. Buddy, what did you think of this movie?
I think it's funny. At the time, I remember liking this movie, and I do think that on its raw action merits, you know what? David Leitch is the co-director of John Wick. He did Deadpool 2. He's done a bunch of other stuff, right? Bullet Train, obviously, which I liked a lot. I think he's just a good, talented director, basically, at the end of the day. But I kind of feel like the reality is this does not give me the good feelings that Fast and Furious gives me. This is ultimately forgettable, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with I guess we'll get into the details or whatever. But a lot of that has to do with The Rock. Really, the centerpiece of this is that The Rock and Vin Diesel were feuding, right? The Rock kind of became co-lead of the Fast and Furious movies. Paul Walker died, and The Rock, he's kind of famous for muscling in, using his sort of stardom. Yeah, right. Using his sort of stardom to get stuff done. And my thing is my expectation, it feels like this in post, is that he essentially gets written out of Fast 9 and the mainline series, right? There is no more Hobbs in the mainline Fast and Furious series, right? He gets this spin-off, and in this spin-off, he kind of gets to do whatever he wants. And I don't think what he wants is good. I think he sort of, I can't believe I'm about to make this point. He sort of ruins the world of Fast and the Furious in a way, with the way that this movie sort of frames and approaches things. And I know how insane that sounds. This is a movie franchise, right? Where, they do evil doppelgangers for one of the movies. They're fighting a tank and an F1 car that's flipping cars into other cars. They drive out of airplanes. They drive from one building in Dubai to another building in Dubai. And it's just I understand that I understand that it is incredible to be making the claim that this movie ruins that world, right? But there's this I don't know. There's something about this movie that feels off and weird in a bad way. It is kind of the culmination of a feeling that I had, and I sort of described when we talked about Fate of the Furious, how that one feels like it's in the middle of this fucking identity crisis. The identity crisis of Fate of the Furious really does seem to get kind of split open with F9 and with Hobbs and Shaw, and Hobbs and Shaw is not my favorite for those reasons, I guess.
That's fair enough. Also, just real quick, I think you might be on the wrong mic.
Am I on the wrong mic? Let's check.
But I kind of feel that, like, this is all in the trailer, so I don't think it quite veers into spoiler territory yet, but it's like, it feels kind of like a kind of bog standard action flick with like a tourism ad for American Samoa tacked on the end. Like, it felt like if you told like a robot or a committee that these movies were about family and then told them to go make another movie without any other detail, and then they made this movie, right? Like they were clearly trying to hit on those family themes, right? Like The Rock's family and Jason Statham's were
yeah. He has this whole thing at the end about how, whatever the bad guy's name is, I didn't even remember, like what you've been missing is heart at the end. And it's just like, that stuff rings real false to me. And I don't think it would ring false if Vin Diesel was saying it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's true. That's because I think that's because like Vin Diesel doesn't really crack wise the way The Rock does, right?
Yeah.
Like,
no, that's exactly why, right? Vin Diesel, like I said, Vin Diesel treats this shit like it's Shakespeare, right? And The Rock wants to do bits, he wants to do these goofy bits, and it sort of ruins it.
You know what this is? This is actually, I think, this is like what we were talking about with, like, Deadpool works best as a secondary character in another movie, right?
Yeah.
This is like when the Lancer gets the camera turned on him for the whole time. You can't do it for that long, or else it kind of like doesn't quite work, right? He's defined as the foil to the hero, right? And in this movie, like, The Rock is trying to be that hero. Like, both him and Jason Statham are like foily characters, right? And they're not foiling against anything, right? Like, even Jason's, or even the Deckard Shaw's sister is not like hero-y enough for that, or like she doesn't have a front and center enough role.
Yeah, this is another thing that I think is tough. It is functionally a buddy cop movie, right? Where you have this like odd couple pairing. But in any of the great buddy cop films, right? Maybe Men in Black is the best example I can think of off the top of my head. The reason that those movies work is because the two halves of the coupling are wildly different, right? You have Tommy Lee Jones, who can do his thing, and he's playing off of Will Smith doing his thing, right? There are differences between The Rock and Jason Statham. Like, I'm not dumb enough to say that there aren't. But I don't think that they're pronounced enough in terms of vibe or like energy to really like let the contrast graduate to become a true juxtaposition, right? Right now they're kind of these contrasts of like muscle bound. Like there's a weird
it's because they're trying to do big guy, little guy, but like Shaw isn't enough of like a little guy for that to like work. Right, like he doesn't have a little guy personality, right? Like,
and there's also a thing of like brutish and finesse, right?
Right.
Shaw drives a McLaren. He like this very like sleek car. The Rock, Hobbs drives these gigantic trucks, right? Like that's his thing, right? But because, and this one is weirdly on Shaw, but because Shaw has this Cockney accent and like lowbrow British energy to him, it totally ruins the like posh James Bond thing they're kind of going for with him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Because like he reads more like a mafioso than like a British spy, or like what you're saying, right? Like this is where you get like, and this. this movie would have been better if it had been the two Shaw brothers, right? Like playing off each other in that way, right?
Yeah,
like
Owen and
or The Rock and Owen, right? Like that's
yes.
So okay, I guess spoiler warning for whoever.
Yeah,
cares,
okay, we should do spoilers. Sure.
The thing, like I know this is like a dumb, like nitpicky type thing, but like when he goes to their mom and she's like, "I want to see you and your sister walk in together," right? I'm like, what about the brother? He's not dead yet, right? Like.
He showed up in the last movie. He's
right.
Part of the, they infiltrate Cypher's plane together, like her crazy plane headquarters. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't, like, I was hoping they'd at least like give him a cameo, right? Like he shows up with the two of them in that like, ending scene with the mom, but like, I guess not.
Yeah, I think the pitch of I actually think that the pitch of it's like what's the name of the guy in Die Hard? Bruce Willis's character. Do you remember?
Wow. I
feel like God, yeah, I'm totally blanking on this. But I now have to look it up because it's going to kill me if I fucking don't.
Die Hard. John McClane.
John McClane, right? I think the pitch of John McClane and James Bond team up to do an action movie is killer, right?
Yeah.
And you can sort of see how maybe in another world they could have gotten there. But like because The Rock kind of slathers this, him persona all over top of it. And this is sort of the thing I was complaining about. Do you remember Black Adam? This is sort of the thing I was complaining about at Black Adam, right? And when I talked about how that trailer felt amazing, it's because The Rock was not doing his shtick, right?
Right.
This movie is all The Rock doing his shtick, which is why it's like so frustrating. But I definitely think that would have worked better. And I think so. And so anyway, my sort of central thesis is that it's actually a pretty well-made movie. The action and stuff is pretty good. Especially this is probably the Fast and Furious film that actually has, in my opinion, like the best like fights, right? Like choreography for two guys beating the shit out of one another, right? And not that the Fast and Furious has done a lot of this stuff, but like things like Shaw and Vin Diesel fighting, where Vin Diesel takes the two wrenches and wields them like fucking lightsabers in Furious 7, right? Like that stuff is the stuff that really popped off the screen to me, and I was like, oh, this is great. The car stuff is okay. I like the car stuff at the very end on American Samoa. They're fighting a helicopter. They're doing this thing with the.
I was gonna say the chaining. So they chained together like 4 of these like buggies, right? And like that felt like the most Fast and Furious moment of the entire movie, right? Because like the first one comes in, and then 2 more come in. It's like they're replaying like the same track on the like the record skip twice, right? Like. It's like that's a big Fast and Furious energy, right? Like
yes,
just like. Over the top stupidity pulls this is not how any of this works, right? Like, apparently if you're strong enough, the helicopter will go up, right? Like you just have to pull on the fucking joystick harder and it'll just work. Yeah. Right.
It's like that isn't how traction on like wheels work. Like I don't know. Those thoughts were not in my brain at the time, but they are in my brain now. It's like that kind of thing. I also quite like the McLaren chase. They do this whole chase scene in London where Shaw is driving a McLaren. And there's this great bit about how, so obviously in England you are on the right side, and so The Rock is on like the left side, and he's doing stuff. He's pulling out his gigantic, revolver and shooting guys. He does a thing where he grabs a guy off of a bike and runs him, and he gets like smacked into a wall. There's a bunch of neat stuff there. The car stuff, I think is good, but not great, mostly because there's moments of like CGI bullshit that I don't like, which is sort of the same thing that I was complaining about in 4, right? To me, the thing that is the earmark of like truly great Fast and Furious stuff, and we're going to see some of this in F9, and I'm very excited to point out all of it, because in F9, they work really hard to do these stunts practically, which is ridiculous. The moments where things are not real and it kind of gets into that CGI mess is always where the car stuff will lose me. Though I was a huge fan of the way that they did the callback to sliding under the trucks or whatever. That one was CGI, but it was just sweet, and it is a classic Fast and Furious move. Like, the coolest stunt in the original movie is the street racer driving under the trailer for the tractor trailer.
I pegged a different source of inspiration for the motorcycle sliding under the truck. Buddy, have you ever seen the clip from that Bollywood movie where someone like drifts a fucking horse under a truck?
That sounds ridiculous.
I will see if I can find this. Bollywood.
Bollywood horse slide.
Yes. I will post a link to this in the.
Oh wait, yeah, I have absolutely seen this. I think I might have even seen no.
See, this is what I pegged as the inspiration for the fucking for the fucking motorcycle slide, just because like I looked at it and like that's the fucking horse slide. That's absolutely 100% the fucking horse slide right there.
Maybe. So yeah. What were we talking about?
The car chases. There was too much CGI, or there was the car stuff was mediocre because of the CGI, essentially, right?
Right. Yes.
But I do want to say that I think that this movie doesn't like, even though I bag on some of the later movies for like not really being racing movies anymore, they care about the cars, and I don't think they care about the cars so much in this movie, which is why I want to call it more of like an action flick than a Fast and Furious movie, right? Like this is like this could have just been like Jason Statham and The Rock in any movie, right? Because they have like these characters that they play, right? And like this is The Rock doing his shtick and Jason Statham doing his shtick, right?
Yeah.
And the fact they happen to be Hobbes and Shaw is not actually particularly material to the movie, right? Like, previously, right? Like they, like in the last movie, right? They came up with a reason why they didn't call Paul Walker, right? Like they were like, we promised to keep him out of it. And they, granted it was just lip service, but they did it, right?
Yeah.
Here, there's like, neither of them are like, should we call the rest of the crew? Right, like this is a Fast and Furious movie, and like like I could see them coming up with an just have like fucking Ryan Reynolds' character being like, no can do, buddy, or something like that, right? Like,
yeah, it's also crazy to me that The Rock is like, I work alone, because he obviously doesn't. First of all, in the 5th movie, he has a whole cadre of guys, some of whom are named, one of whom is like an important lore character who shows up in later films, right? In the 6th movie, he shows up and joins the crew and fights right alongside Vin Diesel with no issue. In the 7th movie, he's so integral to the piece of, it is nuts to me that he ever said, I work alone. It makes zero sense. He obviously does not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't even think about that, but that's partially because like it's The Rock, like, it's The Rock being The Rock, right? Like this is like, I feel like there's like a 40-minute long, like video essay to be made, like folding ideas, watch one of these guys like push up their fucking glass and explain to you how actually Hobbes and Shaw is a WWE match that they made into a movie or something like that. Because I feel like there's like something like that in here, right? Like, they're both like characters. Like WWE is where you get these kind of like non-contrasting characters fighting each other, right? Like they're all, and like, The Rock's being the rockiest he has been since probably the WWE. Shaw is like a character in this kind of mold where like he's like small and wiry, but he's still like a tough guy, right? Like, and it's all about like the, it's all about like the storyline is there, but like ultimately it's about the hits, and I think that's kind of what happens here, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention about the contrasting stuff is that there's another good contrast here, which is that The Rock is a cop and Shaw is a criminal.
Oh yeah,
right? They are fundamentally, and there is a bit of that in the sense of like the movie talks about how, you know, Shaw and his sister were like engaged in pulling these heists even as they're kids, right? The mom is in jail, all this stuff. Like the idea that like he is this accomplished criminal, I feel like, is the other sort of source of contrast, but that also never really goes anywhere. And weirdly, that stuff sort of like lives with some of the other characters, like with his sister or whatever. So it's not like there's this thing where Hobbes needs to come to terms with sort of the, you know, you can imagine a version of this where it's like the lawful good and chaotic neutral teaming up, right? Or
yeah.
you can even say chaotic good, right? Teaming up sort of thing, right? Like that also just doesn't factor into here, which bums me out because
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That would be the way to go with this, right? Is like
yeah,
have The Rock lean into being a cop more than anything else, right? Because like that kind of worked in the last movie, right? Like they basically did that thing, right? Where it's, you know, The Rock's like, I'm not going to fucking like, you know, no cheat. I'm gonna do this by the book, right? And Jason Statham's like sitting opposite. He's like, "Oh, big man, blah 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 blah," right? And they have that fucking jail scene. But like, you know, it's like they don't do anything with it. I think forgettable might be the best way to describe this movie, right? Like Idris Elba's character is kind of like whatever, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, I had forgotten he was in this movie until like obviously he popped on screen. Then like, oh, I remembered some of these ads. Like I remember the truck, the cars attached to a helicopter from the trailer. I remembered the two of them fighting side by side through that corridor from the trailer, which, by the way, was better in the trailer because they didn't have that fucking stupid moment where Jason Statham has to take like 4 minutes to figure out whose face to throw against the panel to get through the door. Like, and like, but like, and I remember Idris Elba was in the trailer, but like he's just like so nothing, right? Like this.
Well, so I actually quite like Idris Elba in this, just on a force of raw charisma, right? But what I don't like is the way that he is sort of undercut by, you know, so they're working for like Ension or some like weird corporation that is literally doing like mad scientist shit. And again, the Fast and Furious universe, right? Where granted there are secret government organizations who have infinite amount of money led by a guy named Mr. Nobody, right? But like, I don't know, there's just like a level of realism to superpowers that shatters this illusion for me, right? Even if like we would all sort of cognitively understand that the Fast and Furious crew theoretically have superpowers in terms of being able to drive car good, right? I think I would say that the universe doesn't think of that as a superpower, basically.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. Right, like everything in the movies is like, you know, it's not accurate per se, but like it's like something that doesn't seem like too out of bounds, right? Like the worst thing in the movies, like the worst thing, like, and when I say worst, I mean kind of like most far-fetched thing in the movies is the kind of like world-spanning network that lets you like pin anybody down, like that like, but it's also like kind of used sparingly, whereas like this is like pure sci-fi shit, right? Like, which is,
I mean, and they also reference it in the other movie where they show that it doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
you know, they use it in the next movie, and oh, someone has already figured out how to break that system. It doesn't work that way because, you know, it pings false IDs all over the globe or something like that. You know, it's like, I don't know. There's just something about he has literal superpowers that bugs the shit out of me. Even though the line "I'm Black Superman" is great, and they were correct to use that in the trailer. And like I said, I love that Idris Elba is in this. But the thing about like the director, his like relationship with this like enigmatic director, and the like sequel pitch that I guess we're never getting, right? We're never getting this sequel, apparently. The sequel pitch of like, oh, the director is some mysterious guy from Hobbes's past or whatever. It's just like it totally undercuts Idris Elba as the like brutally efficient, super dangerous guy that they are fighting against. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot here that's also just kind of like whatever, right? Like that end scene where the director decommissions Idris Elba. They just kind of stand there while he falls into the ocean and like don't appear to react to this. It's like, I guess that's the way it goes, right? Like, which was a little bit weird.
Don't love that.
I don't know. Also, like, so there's at the very end, there's this line where The Rock says, I believe something like, "Here comes the kryptonite," which is a callback to the Black Superman reference, right? This is like when he like pile drives him at the end. I thought that was like a fun line, like a fun one-liner, but it didn't work in this movie because the tone's way off, right? Like,
yeah,
like this needed someone more earnest, right? Like it's this I think would have worked as a Vin Diesel Rock movie, right? Like,
right. Yes. Right.
Yeah, like Shaw's just like the wrong person to play opposite. At least for the like, because the tone of this movie is a lot less charming and a lot more kind of like a lot less earnest and a lot more edgy, right? Like this feels like they tried to make a Nolan Batman movie, or like, you know, John Wick. John Wick's the better comparison because it's the same director, right? Like they basically made a John Wick movie in the Fast and Furious universe, and they tried to like sprinkle in some of that Fast and Furious tone and didn't quite land at different points, right? Like, I don't know. I think, like I said, I think the family theming, I think it works on its own merits, right? But it doesn't work the same way that like the Fast and Furious family theming is supposed to work, right? Like the Fast and the Furious is not just about the family you have, it's about the family you choose.
Yeah.
And about like building that for yourself. Whereas this movie is just kind of about the family you have and like, making up with them and making amends with them, which is a fine enough message on its own. But it feels like they were trying to do the Fast and the Furious family thing, and they just missed the mark with like the version of it that they did. Again, like, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, like, as a spin-off, it kind of works, right? Like, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I do think family is like an undercurrent here. Part of this, I think, is that it's unsupported, right? You get a lot of these lines as sort of these throwaway dialogue, and it's almost even hard to parse. Like I'm specifically thinking about with Shaw and his sister, right? Like part of it is that I don't even remember this guy's name. It's like Briggs or something like that.
Hexton
part
Briggs,
of
something like that. Brixton Hux.
Brixton, maybe. Yeah, Brixton would maybe be it. Anyway, is that he framed Shaw. They were both in like the same Black Ops unit or whatever, and then he framed Shaw. And his sister like held a grudge against him for it or whatever. But I just feel like that's like ultimately pretty unsupported, just kind of by the action of the story. And the stuff on Samoa at the end, which I do like that stuff. Just because I think it's neat. I think it's out there and interesting in a way that some Fast and Furious stuff isn't always. It's you can get pretty deep into cars on roads or whatever. So I liked a lot of the kind of hacked together. It almost had like a Mad Max vibe to it in a weird way. The way that these like cool cars were created. All that stuff is happening on American Samoa, and there's setup for it. But because like the real key character seems to be his daughter, The Rock isn't really doing a true like setup and payoff until the end credits because his daughter isn't there, right? So I don't know. I think
Brixton Lore, by the way.
Brixton. Okay, cool.
Brixton Lore.
His name is Lore, really? Like Lore?
Yeah, Brixton Lore. Also, fun fact, apparently, what's it called? Roman Reigns played one of The Rock's brothers, which is
yeah, I
funny.
did know that because they're cousins, I think. Roman
they
Reigns
really?
and The Rock. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, right? They're from this like special wrestling family.
Like, as in like a real
Like The
wrestling
Rock's dad is also a guy. I'm pretty sure.
Huh. Interesting.
Or maybe maybe it's a football thing. Maybe they're also football thing. So Roman Reigns, fuck. How would I even know? Where would it even say?
Is Roman Reigns related to The Rock? The pair don't share the same blood, but they belong to the same famous wrestling Anoi family and refer to each other as cousins. I butchered that pronunciation, by the way.
Yeah, okay. So it is what I thought. Yeah, he is part. They are part of this wrestling dynasty or whatever that The Rock is in there. And a couple of like others. I don't know. There's apparently this huge thing. I don't know the details of it, but other people, I guess, do.
The Rock's grandfather was blood brothers with Roman Reigns and the Usos' grandfather. So I guess they share a great grandfather.
Okay.
Wow. Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this movie did kind of make me want to go to American Samoa, so there's that.
Yeah, so I think that stuff is just The Rock, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he cares a lot about his Pacific Islander heritage. And so I'm pretty sure he just muscled in and was like, we're setting the whole fucking thing in the back half of this movie on American Samoa, which, to be fair, like I said, I like that part.
Yeah.
I like a lot of this stuff. I also do like the drama you get in his backstory. I sort of wish this came in sooner, right? The idea that the reason that The Rock became a cop is because his dad was like a shitty criminal is like perfect, like simple, straightforward backstory for a guy like this. And I just kind of wish it was like, I don't know, it was like a deeper, bigger part of his
like the greater
story,
lore.
I guess. Yeah. Like one of the things that they reference is how when he goes back to American Samoa and he hangs out with his brother Jonas, right? They're entirely legit. They're not doing crime anymore. And I kind of wish it was the opposite. I sort of wish that the reconciliation that's happening there is he gets kicked out because he chose to become a police officer, but now that The Rock is coming to this understanding with chaotic aligned individuals, let's call them, he can reconnect with his family who sort of ousted him for going down this like lawful route. Essentially, I feel like that would have like held the movie together, basically.
And you even have a line where Jason Statham is like, "Oh, why did you tell me your family was so cool?" or something like that, right? Like where like the Jason Statham basically implies that like he gets along better with his family than The Rock does, right? Because they're like both petty criminals or whatever, or
which is sort of the opposite of what happens with the sister, because the sister is the opposite of that story with Jason Statham, right? She was a criminal who went straight, became a law person or whatever, and that's like kind of the underpinning of like their stuff. It's funny that I like Jason Statham so much in this movie because I kind of don't like Shaw all that much in the Fast and Furious sort of setup. I just don't love his place in the story, mostly because he fucking killed Han. How does he go to the family barbecue? It will forever boggle my mind. But whatever. They're trying to redeem him, I guess. And in the trailer for Fast X, he has a moment that makes me like him. So maybe we're on the big Shaw redemption arc that I'm excited for.
I feel what arc? It feels like they have like insta redeemed him like since like 8, right? It's like, he cares about his brother and he wasn't actually evil. He did a thing because family, right? Like this is, you did the bad thing for family, therefore everything is forgiven forever, right? Like, I feel like
it's rough that it is one movie later and there is no like Shaw is the straight up bad guy in Fury 7, at least with The Rock. Part of the turn in Fast Five is that halfway through the movie, they get The Rock on their side. They team up with The Rock in order to take down. I almost said Bolsonaro. Holy shit! Whatever the guy's name is, I can't fucking remember.
Yeah, the drug lord guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the drug lord guy. So like you at least get it how in the sixth movie the Rock kind of joins the team a little bit more directly. Because you know even inside of the movie where he was a villain, he sort of has like this like cute turn at the end. That doesn't happen with Shaw. There is no cute turn at the end. They face off and then Vin Diesel crushes him with a parking garage, basically. And it's just like, in the next movie, I've hired you some help. And then boom, there he is. What? Everyone, you know, it's just like, it's a little too quick. The redemption arc that I'm referencing, though, is that over the next couple of movies, I'm getting more and more acclimated to Shaw being part of the team. I'm less and less pissed off about it. So,
yeah, I mean,
I guess that's a thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's like not quite the right character for the series, right? It's like you dropped like, you know, like an action hero into the middle of this but action hero attitudinally, right? Like this would be like if, you know, you brought in Liam Neeson to play his character from Taken just like straight into the movie, right? Like it'd be like, I kind of see it. He cares about his family too, very clearly, right? But like, it's not the right attitude for this movie, right? Like, and I feel like Jason Statham has that problem. Although I guess, you know, not a real problem. I don't know.
You know, honestly, I think part of my thing is that he has the perfect setup to drive these elegant English sports cars.
Yeah,
and that's
fair.
just like a thing that you could add. Because, you know, you have Vin Diesel, you obviously have American muscle cars, right? Who else has a type? Giselle drives the motorcycles. Brian is driving Japanese imports. Han also drives Japanese imports, obviously, right? You know, Roman is the tech guy, or no, not Roman. Tej is like the tech guy. Roman, what does Roman like to drive? Roman likes to drive like the really flashy cars, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah. He drives the ostentatious cars.
You know what I mean? And so you have a guy who will drive an Aston Martin, right? Or a Jaguar, or like, you know, a McLaren, obviously.
Yeah, the problem is this should have been his brother, right? He's like, I guess
Luke Evans just is not as much of a like leading man draw.
Yeah,
as,
I guess,
you know, Jason Statham.
Oh man.
I will also say one more thing that I appreciate, which is when the fights, Jason Statham, I think, is a very good action star in terms of he can execute on these fights in a good way. I don't know that Luke Evans could do that, right? You know, just because he doesn't necessarily have the same sort of level of chops, right? So something I'm thinking about, for instance, is the fight where he goes to his sister's apartment and he gets ambushed by like those special forces guys and he's just like beating the shit out of them. Like, part of what I praised about this movie are those choreographed fight scenes. And I think those are only satisfying when you have a capable actor in the role, right? Maybe Luke Evans is not that guy.
Right. But I mean, like, you know, have Daniel Craig play basically James Bond Fast and Furious edition, right? To do it, right? Like that's what I mean, right? Like you want that spy kind of attitude.
God, could you imagine?
Yeah.
Could you fucking imagine?
So, Lou in the chat says, I would watch
so
Liam
cool.
drive a fast car and ruin all the vibe of the franchise, grandpa of the family. Honestly, that's kind of like Liam Neeson plays the father of Vin Diesel and John Cena, and you have a flashback to Vin Diesel and Liam Neeson working on his fucking muscle car. That would be amazing.
Also, Lou in the chat says, how dare you, Luke Evans is amazing. Look, I'm not trying to get on Luke Evans' case. I love Luke Evans, okay? Listen, I love Luke Evans from the Hobbit movies, which is a dangerously bad take that I think a lot of people would get mad about or whatever. I am fully in camp Luke Evans. What I am doubting is whether or not Luke Evans can perform the kinds of high level action choreography that's sort of demanded of this movie. Because to be honest, even The Rock, I don't think does it. I think the good fights are Jason Statham fights, right? Part of this is that The Rock has weird stuff. This is like a famous thing that in his movies, The Rock has like he has like special rules about like how you can write him in a fight scene, which I think are really bad. I think it's that he can't like The Rock can't take a punch or something like that. Like, am I right about that?
I feel like he took a punch in this movie.
Like, okay. The Rock limits the number of punches he can take in his contract, and it limits how badly he can be beaten up on stream. Though, to be fair, Jason Statham also apparently has the same thing. Jason Statham, The Rock, and Vin Diesel all can't lose fights. They're contractually obligated to not lose any fights, which, to be fair, I think that sucks really bad. I think that sucks real bad.
Yeah, no, actually, right? Like, you need like, especially having 3 of them in one movie, right? Like, that's rough.
And especially what I think of as being good in like specifically the John Wick movies is like how much it makes it better that Keanu Reeves gets fucked up. I'm like, oh man, I want to talk about John Wick 4. You haven't seen it, right?
No, because we've been watching these fucking movies for 3 months.
Watching these fucking movies for 3 months. True. Yeah, in John Wick 4 is maybe one of the greatest counterexamples to this principle, right? Because he gets fucked up in that movie. I mean, even in John Wick 1, he gets fucked up. He gets so insanely fucked up in John Wick 1 and 2 and even 3. All of these movies are about Keanu Reeves getting like super fucked up. So the idea that you're not allowed to lose any fights with The Rock is kind of like weird, and it makes you feel like, you know, like something I've complained about in the past when it comes to Marvel movies. And Marvel movies, it's because they're using CGI to do this, but the feeling of fighting inflatable arm flailing tube mans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like fighting ghosts. You're not actually punching anything. This is my complaint about Marvel cinematography compared to cinematography from Zack Snyder's superhero movies. Zack Snyder's movies are all about that impact, right? When Superman lands a punch, it sends this shockwave, right? And the damage and destruction that shows up in Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel is a reaction to how hard these guys are hitting each other and how much damage is being done, right? Whereas in something like Avengers, you'll have Thor, who is just as strong as Superman, hit a guy with his hammer, and it feels like I'm watching somebody like, it feels like he's getting hit with like sock and boppers. You know what I mean? It's like, It just has no impact. It has no force. And it's because, it feels like they're basically, these are CGI bad guys who you don't have to show that stuff on, so you don't, kind of thing. They have their manly man images to keep up. Toxic bullshit. Keanu is above that. True. I also just think it's better. It makes these movies better. I don't know. Like, even outside of the personal like look or image or appeal of any of these characters and how this stuff like looks and works when it is tough and when they lose fights is when it is satisfying to see them kind of triumph and overcome, right? So mhm. Yeah, we all love an underdog and a comeback story. This is exactly the point, right? Like the typical, like most stories are constructed this way. There is a protagonist who is weak. He undergoes a character arc. He has some need he needs to fill. He fills this need. He grows and changes, and he becomes more powerful than the villain. The villain who stays static, who doesn't grow or change, right? starts the story being powerful, but because he is rigid and refuses to change or grow, right, he gets defeated by the hero in the end. This is why in Aquaman, when Aquaman fights Orm in the beginning of the movie, he explicitly loses and has to get bailed out by Mira in order to not be fucking killed in the Ring of Fire. And it is only when he undergoes his character arc, he comes back with his super cool trident, that he can 1v1 Orm and actually win the second time. The same thing happens in Black Panther, right? Killmonger 1v1's Chadwick Boseman, right? I can't remember his name, fucking T'Challa. 1v1's T'Challa, throws him off of a cliff or whatever, and T'Challa needs to, sort of deal with his own relationship with his father and the complicated feelings therein. That growth is what allows him to beat Killmonger in the end. That stuff is just nowhere in any of these fights. It feels like even with the fights that they technically lose with Brixton, those are they don't feel like losses in the same way, right? Because it's like they're running from Brixton and they know they can't beat him, but nobody says that, or it's not really like demonstrated all that clearly, but they just do away with him temporarily such that they can then continue on doing whatever, right? In the McLaren thing in the streets of London, Jason Statham pulls that move where which, to be fair, is very cool, because it's, and I don't know that it's a callback, but Owen Shaw pulls the same move in Furious 6. Anyway, or Fast and Furious 6, where they're being chased by the motorcycle, and he shoots himself right in front of the motorcycle on the other side of a bus. And so Brixton doesn't know he's doing that turn, and he ramps off of the fucking McLaren and into some other bus, double-decker bus. Yeah, exactly. It's like that. These are the ways that they are able to defeat Brixton, by sort of delaying him, because the implicit set of circumstances is that they cannot beat him in a 1v1, right? And then the only way they beat him at the end is in the 2v2, where they're working together and they're like, oh, he can only do his analytical bullshit on one of us at a time, so I'll take a punch so that you can land one, is like the line that they use.
Yeah, I take a punch for you, brother, or something like that. Also, my apologies to people at home. My microphone went out for some reason. I will have to examine that. But the thing I was going to say is, like, these movies kind of work because they don't actually get into that many fistfights, right? Because it is a car movie, right? Like,
yeah, it's car v car.
Yeah, Vin Diesel is presumably allowed to lose car stuff, right? Like, because it's not him dying. Although, now that I think about it, like, is the implication that, like, he's never actually lost a car race? He just, like, lets Paul Walker win some of them? Is that what's happening?
So that is an open question. He lets Paul Walker win one race because he knows that Brian is about to be a dad.
Right.
And he goes easy on him. That's it. I think that's in Fast 5, right?
But yeah, no, I mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, because they're not fighting as much, right? It's not as big a, like, it doesn't feel as weird that they can't lose fights. They can lose other things, right? Like, you know, and also the cast is big enough that somebody can lose, right? Like, for all of this being, like, Vin Diesel's series, this was, like, Paul Walker up until the passes, right? He is, like, the main character of the series, right? He is the point of view character, which is maybe the more correct term. Right, he's the person you're supposed to. Like, he's the Luke Skywalker to Vin Diesel's Han Solo. Maybe, is that right? Do you think that's right?
I guess so. I don't know. It's hard to. I kind of feel like they're both simultaneously Lancers, and because, like, Vin Diesel is the one who cares about family, right? Which, like, that's like the opposite of Han Solo.
Yeah,
Han Solo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but, like, I don't, like, so I think you're right in that sense, and maybe the things don't just draw one to one, but, like, I feel like Paul Walker is definitely the protagonist, and Vin Diesel is the Lancer as that kind of relationship goes. I mean, I think it's definitely true in the first movie, and I think maybe it gets less true as the series goes on, but, like,
yeah. Okay, I would agree. Well, man, I don't know. It's because That's really tough. Maybe it just doesn't map well at all.
Yeah.
Like having kind of like a frontman Lancer relationship. Because like the Lancer is typically like a foil. And I do think that Vin Diesel and Paul Walker are foils for one another in these movies. But like, normally I guess I don't know. There's like a certain level of aloofness that comes with being the Lancer, I feel like, typically, right?
Yeah.
Like Goku, to use another version of this, Goku is the family man and the one who cares about friendship and family, right? Vegeta is the one who cares about winning and beating fights and being the best or whatever, right? And that's not really a relationship that Brian and
Yeah, I don't know. I also think
have.
that like I don't know, maybe I'm fighting the hypothetical too much, but I think that like I don't know. I only know Dragon Ball through like memes, and the meme is that like Goku's a terrible father and Vegeta's actually the better father.
Yeah, but that's true. That is real. But in like the story universe,
right? Yeah,
the
yeah.
idea is that if we were to actually, part of what makes, I don't know, this is a Dragon Ball tangent I get. Part of what makes Vegeta such a compelling character is that that the thing he cares about most of all is winning and fighting. But the moments of true love he has for his children, Trunks specifically, but also Bulma, his wife. Those moments shining through are so much more meaningful. Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
When Vegeta is fighting, this is the famous one. Vegeta fights Majin Buu, and Trunks is there, and he realizes that Boo is not going to stop, right? Boo is going to destroy the world, and his son is right there. And Trunks wants to help out. And to be fair, Trunks has helped out in the past, right? Trunks is like a capable fighter. It's just he's also a child or whatever. That's the moment for Vegeta when it clicks, and all of a sudden his motivation goes from I want to defeat the bad guy because he is the bad guy and I want to be stronger than him to I want to defeat the bad guy because I need to save this world so my son doesn't die, right? And he knocks Trunks out and stops Trunks from helping and then kills himself because he thinks that if he essentially supernovas all of his chi, he can annihilate Boo entirely or whatever. It's a very meaningful sacrifice in like the story or whatever. And that's only possible because Vegeta is the Lancer who normally is, unconcerned, less concerned with family than Goku is.
Yeah, I think maybe the thing I'm pointing to here, which maybe isn't quite like protagonist Lancer relationship, is like Paul Walker is the character that needs to typically what was Brian, right? Brian's the character's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian needs to grow into being, he needs to not quite come of age, but like grow into the person grow into the hero that the story needs him to be. Whereas, Vin Diesel's kind of already there. And generally this kind of framing is like the kid, right? Like, it's not necessarily a child, just kind of like the younger, less experienced member needs to grow and surpass the kind of like senior partner who is like typically the Lancer, but like, this is like Luke is less capable than Han initially, but grows to be greater than Han, right? Like, what's another example of this? Like, I think that is part of where the Fast and the Furious is going, where Brian, but like then this kind of like Vin Diesel kind of takes over as like more of a deuteragonist, or primary protagonist by the end of it, and so like because like Brian has things to gain and Vin Diesel mostly just has stuff to lose. There's something here that I'm not quite describing right, but I think it's a big part of it. But I'm still waiting for them to bring back whatever the character's name is from Tokyo Drift. I want him to have like a
Han?
real part. Not Han.
Yeah, Sean. Oh no, Sean.
Sean. I thought you said Han.
Is the name of the kid.
Yeah, Sean. I'm waiting for Sean to have like a real part in any of these movies. But I guess it's not going to happen. I would be pumped if he was back in Fast X, but I feel like that's unlikely.
God, there are so many people in Fast X. I don't think that there. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't think that there's room for for Sean. God, that would be crazy. Could you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they should give him a cameo at least.
Yeah.
Wait, he's in
Anyway,
Fast
is there
9?
anything else you wanted to? Do you want me to answer that question?
I mean, I went to Lucas Black's IMDb page, and it says Fast 9, the Fast Saga. So
Yeah, he is in Fast 9.
I don't want to know any details, but
Okay. Yeah. Him showing up in Fast 9 was a highlight of my viewing experience. Orion is hello little boy.
There's
Hi.
a cat
Are
on
you
screen for
hungry?
listeners.
This is what we're looking for. If you're hearing any bumps in my microphone, it's him.
All right, so
Anyway.
we probably.
I feel like that's enough. I don't have much more to talk about.
I was gonna say I feel like we were maybe like at enough about the actual movie 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, for real. This is my thing. The Rock doesn't understand this movie franchise. I think it's actually pretty good that he's out of it, even though Vin Diesel wants Hobbs to come back. I hope he doesn't. I feel like he would ruin it if.
I think Hobbs works as the character that he kind of is in like some of these later movies, where he's just kind of like a secondary background thing, which I don't know if The Rock is capable of like putting aside his ego enough to like let that happen. But I think like him as like a minor character works, right? Like, I don't know if, but I think I agree with you, right? Like, I think this might be my least favorite of these movies, right? Like,
really, wow, it's just okay, yeah.
This is like the way you talk about something, like, what's it called? Like ambition versus like execution, right? Like,
yeah.
And this movie just feels like the most bleh, right? Like, at least when the other movies are bad, they're being bad in a fun way, and this is just kind of like mediocre, right? Like, I think it is worse than an objective view, like a more objective viewing of it would indicate. Because,
like a truly bad movie is not like, this is part of my thing. The thing that makes a movie bad is being forgettable, and that's a word you use, right? Like, nobody remembers bad movies because they just fall out of your brain. Even something like a Michael Bay Transformers movie is at least good enough to stick there. And I absolutely agree with you. I feel like as much as I like the fight scenes, it is pretty forgettable, and it is maybe, I don't know. I also really hate the fourth movie, like Fast and Furious. So it's definitely competing with that one for bottom slot for me, but
I think,
I don't know.
I think part of this too is like, this is like also my take on The Last Jedi, is that like this movie claims to be a Fast and the Furious movie, but it isn't, right? Like, and that maybe aggravates me more than like if this had been like The Rock and Jason Statham fight Idris Elba in like generic action movie. So yeah. But that all being said, how was your week?
Pretty good. I mean, what did I do this week? I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone. Been playing a lot of I'm trying to like clip off some of these things because I know I want to get back into WoW hard for season 2, which starts today. We're going into the new raid right after this podcast. So yeah, I guess I haven't been playing a lot of Hearthstone. This is a weirdly really good Hearthstone meta. 10 classes are viable, including Warrior. I had a pretty fun Warrior deck that I was really excited about. I was like, the thing for Warrior for control right now is mostly just that the first 3 turns you don't have a lot to do, right? Your good cards are like 4, 5s, and 6s, right? And that's good, but it means, because there's good stuff to do, but it means you just give up the entire early game, basically, right? You just have nothing to do. You're just hero power pass. And there have been versions of Control Warrior that can come back from that, but this is not one of those versions of Control Warrior. And so what I did was I made a pretty controversial change, and I started running a different package for weapons. What a lot of people are doing is using a weapon called Kodohide Drums that every time you gain armor, it gets more powerful, and it has this death rattle that says deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. But if you gain a bunch of armor, you could deal 6 damage to all minions, that kind of a thing. There's another weapon called the Sunken Trident, or the Trident of the Deep, or something like that. It's a 3-mana 3/2 weapon. And when that weapon breaks, it puts another weapon on the bottom of your library that whenever you attack, it deals 2 damage to all enemy minions, right? So it has this like AoE clearing your board effect. And basically the gamble that I was willing to say was Trident is better than Drum Kit, right? The Drum Kit is a 4-mana 3/2. This is a 3-mana 3/2. And there's pretty good ways right now to sort of tutor it out of your deck, pull it out of your deck in order to use it and activate it. And I had really good success. I went on a 7-game winning streak, and I was feeling really good about the deck. And then I was kind of hovering at about 50% win rate, and then I had this brutal, torturous 12-game losing streak where it was an hour and a half of just straight losses. And I was just like, man, Control Warrior is just not there, and it is unfun. But there's another Warrior deck that is playing out in a good way. Menagerie Warrior, which has bothered me because it should be called Zoo Warrior. This is a really aggressive deck that is all about playing cards of different minion types, right? So it's playing undead, elemental, murloc, just all these different minion types, because there's a couple of payoffs in Warrior to doing that. One of which, duplicates a card in your hand, one from each minion type. So if you have a beast, an undead, a murloc, and an elemental, you will get copies of one of each. And then there's another card that's a lot of fun. I love this card. It's called the One Amalgam Band. Which is all creature types, and when it comes into play, it gains one of the evergreen keywords like Rush, Taunt, Divine Shield, all of those, right? There's 8 in total. It gets one of each of those for each minion type you've played so far this game, right? It is an insanely cool and powerful finisher, and the secret tech is one of those abilities is Stealth. Right? So if you can get the One Amalgam Band all the way up to 8, and you can get Stealth, Wind Fury, basically just Stealth and Wind Fury, but there's a couple of other ones, right? And you can get Stealth and Wind Fury, that is your game-ending play, basically. You land a One Amalgam Band, you don't attack with it, you let it keep its Stealth, right? And then you open next turn, bam, bam, it's a 6/6, so 12 damage to the dome, typically, wins you these games. To be honest, this is really different for me. I don't like aggressive decks, typically. I think aggressive decks are not a lot of fun to play. Any kind of deck where I run out of gas, I fucking hate that feeling, right? The feeling of, oh, I emptied my entire hand on the board, they use an AoE, and now I have a 1-mana 1/1 in my hand, right? That's like so unfun to me. But there's actually quite a lot of reload in this deck, which is cool and interesting. And there's just like a lot of really neat, compelling ways to set up these sorts of lethals. And I like the decision making that kind of goes around some of that stuff, right? One of the things that's neat about the One Amalgam Band is that there are effects that will allow you to discover One Amalgam Bands, right? And there is a Quillbore creature type. So if you use a discover effect on a Quillbore, there's only 5 Quillbore in the game. So you are guaranteed a 60% chance to discover a One Amalgam Band if you can nail excuse me, if you can nail that discover effect. And it's like, that is a lot of fun. So yeah, that's been Hearthstone. Oh, I've also been playing another deck called Spooky Mage, where you're generating these things, these skeletons, these 2-mana 2/2s that have death rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. Funnily enough, it's actually based off of the Kel'Thuzad fight. Do you remember Kel'Thuzad in Sanctum of Domination? How he would summon those skeletons, and the skeletons would run towards people, and they would like blow up. It is those, right? It is those skeletons. Those are volatile skeletons. This is the Hearthstone card version of them. But there's a bunch of cards that will create volatile skeleton tokens. And there's this just like aggressive burn mage package that's just like really fun to play with those skeletons, because you're doing stuff about like, you're kind of high rolling about like, oh, I'm going to attack in with my skeleton. I'm going to, have my skeleton, I'm going to attack in with my skeleton and see if the 2 damage goes face or it clears another creature. There's a card called Deathborn, which deals 2 damage to all creatures and summons a skeleton for each one that you kill. So what you do is you set up these intricate boards where there are 7 creatures on the board and they all have 2 or less health, right? And then you Deathborn, and now you have a big swarm of skeletons to get on them. I beat a Blood Death Knight because I just kept summoning skeletons. I summoned a whole board of skeletons, and then he essentially armored up and played a bunch of taunts, right? Because the expectation would be, well, you run your skeleton in these taunts. But I didn't do that. I just played Deathborn again, and I killed all of my skeletons. Each one is dealing 2 damage to, pew, 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 and then it summons a full board of skeletons again. It's just like that stuff is super satisfying. There's one other deck I was going to talk about, but I can't remember what it was.
All right, fair enough.
Oh, there we go. That's my Hearthstone experience. Been playing a lot of it. What are some of the things that you've been playing and talking about?
So I have not been playing a ton recently, just because of various other life commitments. I've been playing a bunch of Marvel Snap just because it's on my phone. It's fun to play. They have finally gotten to the point where they can do like weekly updates, and so they're doing various little balance updates, which I've been enjoying. Today I had a win where essentially, so a very popular card is Wong. Wong says that any on reveal played here, fires twice, right? So I had a very satisfying win where going into the turn, he had a Wong down, and he was clearly gearing up for something. I had first turn, so I threw down a Cosmo. Cosmo prevents on reveals from happening, and so he plays a bunch of cards which don't like, and these are cards that like really rely on their on reveal effects to do something, and it's just so satisfying. And then he immediately retreated, so that felt super good. I think he snapped into it too. I think he snapped, threw down Wong, and then I threw down Cosmo, and he retreated. That always feels great. It feels great to like just be like, fuck you. There are moments where like things feel like really fucked, just like, and this is not super common, so it's not a deal breaker, but like sometimes RNG screws you, right? Like again, this is like a dude gets a Wong down, right? And it's on a space that like he throws a Wong down because the first space is Elysium, which makes things cost less, and the second space is like play a random card on turn 3 for each player. And so he plays the Wong in that space, and the random card that pops out is like this guy who is I forget what his cost, but he's got 10 power, but the trade-off is that in the right space it generates a -10 card, right? Like it's like it's minus 10 power, and so it's on the Wong space, and it generates him 2 -10 voids in the right square, and so that space is at like -24. I mean, it's like not recoverable, and he wasn't like winning well enough in any of the other squares. I will say that that's kind of like some of my most aggravating losses. That's like X-Men Academy, and I think something like that is fair game because it's like, well, you took the risk by setting up a Wong in that slot. But something like X-Men Academy is it plays a random card for each side, but like it doesn't, like, they're not necessarily like, even like I would be happier if it was like of the same like cost, right? Because like normally I would have gotten the worst end of that exchange because he played that card which is like a 4/10. I got a 1/2, right? Like, and that always it always sucks to like get like a bad RNG, but in a way that's like not like doesn't even feel like it's like vaguely balanced, right? Like it's like, oh, it rolled like a 3 cost and you got the bad 3 cost and I got the good 3 cost for like your deck. Yeah, that sucks, but it feels okay. But like to like somebody rolls like a 5 or 6 cost card, and you roll like a 1 or 2 cost, it's like that feels like bullshit. But it's not enough to make me stop the game. Otherwise, outside of video games, I went to Dollywood on Sunday, which was like, I was down in Knoxville for unrelated reasons. Of my girlfriend's brother graduated from veterinary college, um, but to celebrate, we went to Dollywood, which was an interesting experience. A lot less Dolly Parton themed than I would have expected for Dollywood. Like Dolly's tour bus was there, and so we went on that. Like we got to see that, but like there was like ambient music playing at a point, and it wasn't all Dolly Parton music. I'm like, what the hell? But it was like otherwise, it's like a very nice amusement park, right? It's like less expansive than like a Disney, but it's like also much more reasonably priced than a Disney, right? Like, and it was a lot of fun. And I would go back and I'd recommend it to anybody in the Knoxville area of Tennessee. We're in the Smoky Mountains area, I guess, of Tennessee or North Carolina. Yeah. I don't know if I would fly out there specifically to go to Dollywood, but I could think of worse ways to spend my time. Yeah, Knoxville was a pleasant little town, pleasant little city. I should be more proper about it, which I wasn't quite expecting. But cool place.
I weirdly have a bunch of friends over there. I have a bunch of friends who live in Kentucky. People I work with, who are in that sort of like neck of the woods. My sister went to college there. She went to college in Asheville, which is in North Carolina.
I would say Asheville is relatively close to it's across the Smoky Mountains or like I think it's the Appalachians, but like I would say like Kentucky's all the way on. Kentucky's far away.
Is Kentucky far away?
Oh no, it's to the north. I just I guess I don't think of it as like being in there because it's like they're both kind of like mid south. I guess like they're in the middle of the state, Asheville and yeah.
I think of them as being this kind of confluence of Great Smoky, the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, that's fair.
Eastern Kentucky, Eastern Nashville, Eastern
Tennessee.
Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, that kind of whole.
Okay, I buy that.
Yeah, Knoxville is literally right in the middle of it.
The middle of the north-south middle is quite far on the east edge of the state. Always like it's always fun to fly out of tiny little airports. Knoxville's airport is like, it's not like terribly small, but it's like 12 terminals or 12 gates rather. One terminal. Which means the only direct flight I could get was on Allegiant, which is not great, but
what is Allegiant?
Allegiant is a budget-ish airline. I like it's like all economy class, but it's like not quite as economy level as like Spirit or Frontier. I'd put it more like kind of like in the JetBlue tier maybe.
Okay, fair enough.
Right, like the big three are United, American, and Delta. We took Delta back just because Allegiant doesn't fly a flight on Sunday or on Mondays back from Knoxville. So we had to go from Knoxville to Atlanta and then north to Logan and Boston, which was aggravating. Lucy's, I thought Tulsa was small at 20 gates. These kind of like smallish regional airports are like fun and important, I guess, right? Like Indy, I think is like 20 or 30, right? Like I remember the first year we went as a group to Gen Con, we couldn't get a direct flight to Indy. We had to go through Chicago. Or at least most of us did. Actually, that first year or that one year, we all flew into Chicago and drove from Chicago to avoid transferring. But yeah. Anything else interesting I consumed? I don't really think I started. What do you think of the new patch? I put a couple hours into it.
I haven't done any of like the story stuff like that. Have you done story stuff? I did finally, by the way, get into Tyr's Vault and see the elemental proto dragons, and I absolutely agree with you that 100%. That's my theory, is that Tyr created the primal incarnates.
Yeah. So I have done a little bit of the story stuff. I haven't gotten all the way through it. Um, the thing that is amusing me the most is that there's this race of mole people that are like operate primarily by smell, but they all have like very thick Minnesota accents, and it's like it is sending me right. It's just like underneath the Dragon Isles is Minnesota, like subterranean Minnesota, and it's just it is so funny to me. They might be my second favorite race now behind the Hosen. I don't actually even know what they're called.
Niffin, I think.
Niffin, yes, that is correct. We found.
Yeah.
Lou says in the chat we found race people. Yes.
We
should ask Ray if she feels represented now that that the Minnesotan moles are in.
Yeah, I'm definitely very like interested in where the story is sort of going next when it comes to Dragonflight. I had a similar feeling in Shadowlands, right, where it was unclear where things were happening. I guess theoretically we're gonna see the Sarkareth cutscene. Or I don't know. I didn't spoil myself on the Razageth one. I probably am not gonna do that for Sarkareth. And hope to, get a Sarkareth kill relatively, like soon on kind of my own time or whatever. But seeing where, it's always like the end of the raid is where we go next kind of thing. We also know there's a mega dungeon coming out. The 10.1.5 is on the PTR, which is going to have the new mega dungeon. My bet for the mega dungeon is that it is going to be in Thaldraszus, in that like time vault. You know that area where like you freeze the infinite dragon.
Oh yeah,
that is definitely the infinite dragonflight version of Chromie, by the way. It's my new thing, is that I think his name is Eternus. Eternus is the infinite dragon version of Chromie, and I think the mega dungeon is going to be behind there because it just looks like a dungeon entrance, that little spot in the world. And I bet it's gonna have to deal with like Chromie and Nose Dormoon, all that stuff.
I could buy that.
That's my fan theory. Tinfoil hat.
Yeah, I never did the mega dungeon in Shadowlands, like not even once.
You never did Tazavesh?
No.
Oh my god, I loved Tazavesh.
No, I mean it was just one of those things where like I didn't care enough to like get together and like get in a group and do it. So like, and like I couldn't really do it. And like by the time it was like group doable and like the halves, I just didn't. I was just like doing raids at that point, raids and like world content.
I'm very excited for the new upgrade system. They did a big revamp to how item upgrades work, but one of the big things, one of the big changes that's happening that I think is cool is you can now upgrade like raid gear all the way, all the way up, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think is really sweet, right? Being able to get heroic gear and upgrade it into something that's like really powerful rather than having it kind of be outmoded, which is sort of what happens a lot of the time, I feel like. The heroic gear is very static, and we have to like I was kind of sort of talking about this before, right? Like how you need a certain amount of outgearing the raid in order to clear the raid. And like if you're not willing to do Mythic Plus, you just kind of can't do it. But now I feel like it's going to be the opposite. Where clearing the raid is going to be a really efficient way for people to upgrade, and over time, even for someone who isn't getting new drops, getting those whatever they're called,
crests, Dragonflight stones,
and flight stones is going to be pretty huge. Yeah.
I'm interested to see how that works out ultimately, because my immediate kind of reaction was like because they're like, oh, you could do world content too, right, and get these upgrade gears, but like you can only kind of get you can only easily get the first tier of upgrades, which I think were basically like even me who doesn't like really do Mythic Pluses has already out leveled that kind of like base level of gears, or so. Always excited for new Mog to catch, but it's it is what it is. You can only get to 424
with world shit. Yeah. Yeah, interestingly enough, this is also, I guess, news is I'm going to be playing in a Warcraft set D&D game. One of my do you know about Mazinar Cliffgrove, Mountaineer of Casmodan?
I mean, the second part of that title feels like it explains the first part, but
Yeah, so I have this character, Mazinar Cliffgrove, who is Mazinar is a dwarf hunter. He's like a dwarf marksmanship hunter. And he has this backstory where he was part of a dwarven tank crew that was in Lordaeron during the time of the Third War when Arthas shows up and sort of he is working for the Scourge now. He kills his father, right? Plunges Lordaeron into kind of the chaos of the undeath. And so the backstory for Masnar is that he's in this dwarven tank crew, and these dwarves need to drive their tank all the way south from Lordaeron back to Casmodan where they're safe, right? I was talking about this with Rachel, and we were I don't remember how this came up, but I was like this would make such a great D&D campaign, right? Because you have this like pitch, you're surrounded by the undead and all this stuff, and to their credit, they were like, let's do it, and started a big group chat. Now there's a group. We're getting started next Wednesday. It is one of those things where it's like one person has the will to make the thing happen, and it is now happening. But I have been deeply reading the Warcraft 5e fan-made compendium, which is a truly monstrous book. It is over 400 pages of like changes to represent absolutely everything about the Warcraft universe in like in a D&D setting. And yeah, I'm writing the tank rules. I'm very excited about this. I've been trying to figure out how to make the tank stuff good, because the biggest fantasy that I will always have about these sorts of games is I want to have 4 people in a vehicle where everyone is doing their own thing, but it is like satisfying to operate it as a unit. I kind of feel like the Starfinder, I mean, we talked about this a long time ago.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the Starfinder combat rules were close, but didn't quite get there. And so I'm trying to alleviate that with my homebrew tank rules that I have been going goblin mode on.
Yeah, I wonder if how easy that is to do in like kind of like a turn-based setting, right? Like I think part of the thing that makes it work for like the video games, right? Like we played this at Gen Con a couple times is because it's all real time, right? You're all focusing on on kind of your own thing, but you're also kind of like contributing to the main thing, and there's like a real time aspect to it, and you got to kind of like cut power here and give power here, right? Like and that all feels like super satisfying, because you're doing it, you're all working together, and there's like a real time pressure. I think it's a little bit harder for that to work in a turn based setting. And so I'm interested to see if you can pull it off.
Yeah, me too. Maybe I'll show you the rules that I've written, and we can talk about that on stream or something.
Yeah, that'd make a good episode.
My thing right now is I'm getting rid of facing. Right, this was a big thing in Pathfinder, right? That there's facing. I think that's not super fun to deal with, and kind of makes movements complicated. And then my other thing was I tried to give everybody like an action. So do you remember? I don't know if you remember these siege tanks. These siege tanks have a giant roller, like a steamroller kind of thing in the front. And they also have these battering rams, right? So the idea is you have your gunner who's in the turret doing, shooting the gun, right? But you also have the driver who can engage and disengage this gigantic roller, right? So if the driver wants to make attacks, they can do so by, lowering the roller into the thing. And then the other one was the battering ram, because it's like a siege engine. It has the hawk face or the lion face or whatever the face is. I think it's like an eagle or whatever, but that's a battering ram, right? It shoots out, it can do the thing like in WoW. And so all three of gunner, driver, engineer each have like an attack action that they can use if they want to. And the other thing I'm trying to do is think about like, and then there's also like the tank commander, right, who's like the captain in Starfinder. Is I'm also trying to think about like what are some other things that can make these like roles like unique and interesting. So one of them is gears for the driver. The driver can shift gears, which is like a stance thing, right? So if you're in a high gear and you're moving fast, you're doing stuff in a different way than if you're in a low gear, for instance. I'm trying to make that like a fun or engaging sort of sort of system to use. I don't know, stuff like that. There's like armor points and critical I can't remember, it might be called critical damage, right? It's like, you know, armor points is like the HP pool, but when you start taking critical damage, right, that's when the actual mechanics of the system get kind of like fucked with, all that stuff. I don't know, it's interesting. I'm gonna see if I can make it work, see if I can make it happen.
So you've gotten rid of facing entirely.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't matter which way the tank's pointing, you can do kind of whatever you want.
My expectation is, so it won't matter for a lot of aspects of the tank, in the sense of like the turret is immune to facing anyway because it can
Right,
move,
yeah. The
like,
turret
regardless of it.
ignoring facing makes sense to me. It's the other parts that don't quite, like, I feel like in order to feel like a tank, you need like, in order to like give like say the movement some tactical depth, you want like, you know, armor plating on the fronts and sides, which requires facing in order to kind of like make that meaningful, right? Like
Yeah, see, I got rid of that stuff because I think it becomes really complicated, right? But the thing I think facing might have to be there for is like the battering ram,
Yeah.
right? Because the idea for like a battering ram is you need to set it into a position and then it hits and it's going to hit for a million, you know, like I don't remember what they call it in Pathfinder, right? But there's massive damage and personal damage, right? Personal damage is me shooting you with my rifle, right? I open up the hatch of the tank, I pop out the top, and I use my action to shoot you, basically, right? Instead of use one of the tank maneuvers. But if I shoot you with the turret does a bazillion damage, right?
Yeah, that was from Star Wars, I think.
Oh, you're right. Maybe that was from Star Wars. Whatever the case, I like that distinction, right? How there's massive damage, personal damage, right? If I shoot a frost worm with the tank gun, that does normal damage. If I shoot it with my rifle, it doesn't do as much damage, right? The idea is that the frost worm is kind of like an enemy vehicle in a certain sort of sense. And I think that for the crusher and the battering ram, you kind of maybe have to have some sort of like facing stuff. So maybe like on a movement level, facing matters. But I think on a damage level, I don't want to do that thing where it's like, oh, well, we have 8 different health pools on all the different sides of the tank. It's like, no, there's one pool. It is hull point. You know, you have your armor points. When your armor is breached, right, now you're taking critical damage. The critical damage is rolling against the table to say, okay, the turret is now damaged. The turret takes damage again. It's now disabled, right? That kind of thing. And then you have an engineer who can then repair those systems on the fly with jury rigging, right? Like, I think that's the in terms of intake of damage. In terms of movement through the map, you probably have to have some level of that, which is probably something that in my head there are differences between gears, right? So when you're in a high gear, you can't turn, so you can move forward, but it makes the crusher more powerful, right? You can do this huge big crushing attack, right? Stuff like that. This is what I was thinking about when it comes to making movement interesting for the tank.
So something you might consider doing, and this is something that happens that I think you might be able to take from Lancer, because we were talking off stream last night about whether or not Lancer could model this stuff, and I don't think the controls for Lancer quite work. But like a concept it has is that you have essentially a health pool, and then you have structure damage. And so when you empty your health pool, your structure goes down by 1. You roll on a table, and it has an effect, and then your health pool refills again. Right, so like,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so like you roll like a d6, and like lower numbers are worse, and so like you might lose a weapon or a system. And like the systems in Lancer are like, you know, like you can like one of my systems is a is like I have some grenades, or like you can place like a wall down or something, or like it's like a basically a non-direct combat typically type of thing. Um, but or like jump jets or type of deal. And or like you could like suffer like a meltdown or like something that debuffs you for the fight, and I think that's a cool system. Um, so you might consider looking at those rules because I think that might be a neat way to go with that. Like the tank once you breach it, once you like hit it, right? Like it'll lose like maybe it loses one of its gears, or like maybe the turret gets stuck in a direction and it has to fire in the facing direction or something like that.
Yeah, I do actually kind of like that. The way I have it written right now is that there's the different spots on the tank, right? So the turret, the wheels, the crusher, the engine, right? And all of those are also corresponded to a person, right? So for instance, if the turret takes critical damage 3 times, you then start taking personal damage, right? So that what that represents is the turret gets hit its damage, then it gets disabled. Now, anytime the turret is taking damage, you personally inside the turret are taking damage, right? Which I think is like the danger. Of like letting some of these structural damage is a great term for it. I was searching for it, I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna use critical damage, but structural, yeah, is a really strong way to like frame that.
The way we've been saying is like oh, you get structured, and it's
Yeah.
it's a
The thing I like about that is I like the idea that there's armor piercing, right? Maybe if I'm fighting a whatever, right, it's fine, but now, oh, here's this thing and it has armor piercing damage, and it's going straight to that critical pool and like nailing some of these systems. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting, because that would not work with the Lancer, because like Lancer you have like 4 structure points and like and then like a variable health pool on top of it. And there's armor on top of it too, right? And there's separate armor piercing damage. You might consider just like looking at how it does damage to kind of see if that's something that you're interested in, because like I feel like you want that critical health pool to be higher in order for that to work. But yeah, so that's
yeah, the critical health pool definitely has to be high, because the idea is that, oh, and then the other thing is that when the critical health pool goes to 0, you start taking core damage, right? Which is just like the whole thing is fucking falling apart. And everyone is taking damage when you're taking core damage, which is basically if the tank goes to 0 and you guys are still inside of it and you start taking hits, those hits are going to kill you personally, right? It's like, imagine getting like a tank shell penetrating into the hull of another tank and exploding there, right? Like this can do a gazillion damage, that kind of thing.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well, we're at time. We've got a rate to get to, so I think we should call it here.
Okay.
If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsplaygames or youtube.com/@derpsplaygames, where these go out live. Rate and review us on iTunes, wherever you find podcasts. Links are all down in the description. But do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
I'm streaming this Friday, Estrella, which is why I want to mention it. I'm actually streaming 2 games. So right at stream start, we're streaming Cryptmaster. Have you seen Cryptmaster yet?
No.
Cryptmaster was just in Ludonarracon, got a bunch of featuring, which we're pretty excited about. So I am streaming. I'm streaming Cryptmaster first, and then later in the day. Or not later in the day, later in the stream session, Cryptomaster will probably only take like half an hour. I'll be streaming Estrella. There is a poll in the Estrella Discord for what character I'm gonna be on stream, because it's Mooney, Salarius, or Havelius, depending on what people want to do in the poll. So if that's something you're interested in, it's in the Estrella Discord, which I don't think has a discord.gg/Estrella, but it might be that. So yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time to your listeners.
Until next time.